The Regina Bypass project is the largest documented corrupt P3 project in the history of Canada.
Armed with leaked documents, secret recordings, admissions and omissions, Bob Bray, a Canadian aggregate supplier, alleges high-level corruption within the public-private partnership project of the Regina Bypass Construction, a venture that cost taxpayers $2 billion. This bypass is regarded as the most significant transportation infrastructure in Saskatchewan's history, but in fact, there's reasonable grounds to believe that it may also be the biggest fraud committed against the people of Saskatchewan. Ray claims that the Saskatchewan government purchased aggregate for the highway's construction for $500 million at retail prices after initially providing it for free.
The materials manager had already spilled the beans and said that we are getting all of our aggregate from the Ministry of Saskatchewan aggregate source.
Oh yeah, the ministry has supplied us.
But that's not it. Bob's evidence also suggests that Amarjeet Sohi, then the Liberal Federal Infrastructure Minister, was personally involved in facilitating his middle brother Harkesh's trucking company WRV and to quickly haul the aggregate out of Crown land.
We do have WRV.
He thinks like a parasite, and he is a parasite towards Canada.
You were at that meeting on February 21st, where the infrastructure minister was in Regina at the trucker meeting?
Yes,
Oh,
I think so.
Yeah, I thought so.
He came to the trucking company from Ottawa. He did not list his travel and expense it to the federal government. Why did he come to Regina, Saskatchewan? The reason that he came is because he is personally involved in the loot of taxpayers' money.
In this piece of investigative journalism that you won't find anywhere else, I delve deep into Justin Trudeau's former cabinet minister Amarjeet Sohi's history of terrorism-related charges and his involvement in the corruption of the federally funded P3 project in Regina, Saskatchewan. What is the anomaly you encountered with this P3 project?
So the anomaly that I encountered with this P3 project was that it had provincial as well as federal stipulations, because it was a federally funded project, that the aggregate was to be procured from private existing aggregate sources only. There was no Crown resource aggregate to be provided to the winning contractor that would ultimately build this project. So the reason that they initially had said that no Crown aggregate will be utilized was to speed up the construction and bypass a tedious, lengthy federal environmental impact assessment. The short acronym is EIA. So the government wanted to not go through many years of a thorough environmental impact assessment, and they agreed with not providing any Crown aggregate for this project.
The Saskatchewan government's Ministry of Environment determined that a federal environmental impact assessment for the Regina Bypass project was not required, given the Ministry of Highways' affirmation that no Crown aggregate would be used. This decision effectively circumvented the need for an environmental impact assessment for what was the most significant transportation project in Saskatchewan's history. However, Bob, an aggregate supplier closely monitoring the project, observed changes shortly after the federal election, notably with the appointment of Amarjeet Sohi, a new Minister of Infrastructure with a questionable background.
What changed after Amarjeet Sohi was victorious in his election was that the Saskatchewan government somehow gave Crown resource aggregate to VINCI. And I know about this because I had received an internal document that VINCI was requesting pricing for trucking services, and inside of that document, VINCI had listed a ministry aggregate supply source from where all of the granular base course as well as asphalt aggregate, meaning rock and sand, would be coming out of for the construction of this project. And The value of the aggregate required to complete this whole project is in excess of $500 million.
The leaked documents from VINCI-RBDB indicates that 2 ministry pits were allocated for the extraction of granule base coarse and asphalt concrete pavement aggregate. Satellite imagery time-lapse from 2016 to 2019, corresponding with the Regina Bypass Construction period, shows significant activity in these ministry pits. Additionally, municipal maps corroborate that these sites are indeed Crown aggregate land. The executive directors of major projects, David Stearns, was adamant that RBDB was procuring all aggregate from existing private aggregate suppliers and no Crown aggregate would be utilized in the construction.
I talked to David, and David said that the government of Saskatchewan is not allowed to provide any Crown aggregate for this project, and he said that Vinci and its consortium RBDB are procuring all the aggregate from private companies that have existing gravel pits in and around the city of Regina.
The usage of Crown aggregate would result in the violation of the provincial and federal environmental approvals for construction.
I contacted the materials manager next from RBDB, and the materials manager on a recorded phone call affirmed that the government had given them Crown aggregate to use for the construction of this project.
Your aggregate lined up for the whole project already secured, right?
Right.
So, like, how many different pits is that coming from?
Well, in terms of the asphalt, there's just one. And I guess in terms of asphalt, yeah, there's
only
absolutely
one?
zero. There's absolutely zero opportunity there. Like, we are going to bring all our asphalt out of that same pit, and that's not going to change.
You must have a pit very close to Regina as well, right?
Oh yeah, the ministry has supplied it.
The ministry, I'd just like you to clarify on that. The ministry supplied the consortium how many pits?
6.
6 pits.
Yeah, I believe it's 6, maybe it's 5. I don't have it in front of me, but...
Okay. And so you guys crush out of there and then supply your own project with the materials.
While the executive director of major projects for the Saskatchewan government, David Stearns, and the project manager from VINCI-RBDB, Alistair Dickinson, both vehemently denied the use of government-supplied aggregate in the project, the leaked coordinates, corroborating satellite timelines of extraction from Crown land during the highway's construction, and the admissions from the project's material manager paint a very concerning narrative, and the story doesn't end there.
So when the Saskatchewan government allowed for the removal of the aggregate, not only did they cause a massive financial loss to the taxpayers, they also caused a great amount of environmental damage, where millions and millions of metric tons of aggregate has been removed to build this historic project in the province of Saskatchewan.
Compelled by this lack of transparency, I visited the site myself to witness the depth of this issue in those ministry pits, confirming the misuse of taxpayer resources in a project of national significance. This location matches the coordinates for the aggregate source listed in VINCI-RBDB's internal documents. It's Saskatchewan government Crown aggregate land. If the aggregate wasn't taken from here, then why are there so many holes behind me? And where did all the aggregate go?
So this is a gold, eh? This is what they mix with the asphalt oil to make asphalt pavement. And for the Regina Bypass project, there was a grand total requirement of approximately 3.5 million metric tons, and the splits on that were 1.5 million tons for asphalt aggregate, which is here, and approximately 2 million tons of granular base course used for the preparation of the roads prior to the asphalt being applied. So this is the asphalt aggregate here.
With massive holes and towering mountains of waste, the amount of aggregate extracted from this extensive crown land is estimated to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Even from a height of 500 meters, my drone struggled to capture the scale of the operation. The cost to remediate the land will likely fall on taxpayers, adding to the irony of the government buying back aggregate it already owned. I asked the Saskatchewan government if they provided aggregate for this project. The answer I received was not definitive but rather evasive. The Saskatchewan government in its response said that a borrow source from the ministry was utilized by VINCI-RBDB. What's particularly concerning is the link that the government provided as the contract, which leads to this page on Sask Builds. On this page named Regina Bypass Project Agreement, when we click on the main body, it leads us to the project agreement contract dated July 29, 2015. Upon examination, some serious discrepancies and inconsistencies are revealed that should not exist in a multi-billion-dollar taxpayer-funded P3 project. The website table of contents differs from the agreement contract table of contents. There are also about a dozen additional appendices that are not in the project agreement contract. And there are even missing schedules, despite being in the project agreement contract. When we click on the schedule link on the website, it reveals the coordinates of the ministry pits that the government of Saskatchewan provided to VINCI-RBDB, including the one in Indian Head that we have inspected.
If high-level corruption like this continues in Canada, this will be very detrimental for future generations because they will not be able to deal with the financial burden and political criminal nexus that is operating in Canada.
In the document named Project Agreement Contract, there are no mentions of ministry pits at all. Things are further complicated as the Project Agreement Contract has no signatures on it. Why are there no signatures on the Project Agreement Contract? How could the contract be inconsistent, contradictory, and incomplete for a multi-billion-dollar, taxpayer-funded, high-profile project? When we go further back into the request for proposal stage, where the Saskatchewan government asked bidders for a quote, nowhere in the document did the government disclose that it would provide free aggregate, as it would be in violation of its prior affirmation not to provide any aggregate for the construction in order to bypass the lengthy environmental impact assessment of the federal government. But the question arises, did VINCI-RBDB know in advance that it would be provided free crown aggregate? Because this would give VINCI-RBDB an unfair advantage. These are not the type of questions I come to ask easily, as it literally denigrates Canada to a third world country.
A large component of the almost $2 billion was meant for the contractor to purchase this aggregate from private existing suppliers such as myself and not to deplete Crown Resource aggregate.
If VINCI-RBDB indeed received free access to significant amounts of Crown Resources, their need to purchase most of the aggregate from private suppliers like Bob would have been eliminated. Bob believes this led to a substantial financial benefit for VINCI as they seemingly sold the government's own aggregate back to it, potentially pocketing an amount estimated at around $500 million. When Bob approached VINCI-RBDB to sell his aggregate, he was informed by the materials manager, who admitted to sourcing all the aggregate from the government's pit, that the government's payment was prearranged and that the interests of the taxpayers were deemed irrelevant at this stage.
In this particular project, like what the taxpayer is irrelevant. The government obviously has a stake in perception, and the project does as well. But yeah, as far as the taxpayer is concerned, like it's a lump sum project. That's what they're going to pay us. Like the analogy we use all the time is, we got a bucket of money. There's so much money in it. Nobody's putting any more in it.
Yeah. And like the first thing, how you said, well, the taxpayer is irrelevant. I would have to agree to disagree on that, Mike. But basically,
well, they certainly think they're irrelevant in this case, and in the end they're paying for the project. But I say that number has already been decided, and it doesn't change. So.
Yeah.
So the contractor removed all of the gravel from the Crown Ministry gravel pit, paid zero money to the Saskatchewan government, and then the government bought back at retail prices their own aggregate that was used in the construction and completion of this massive historic infrastructure project. There is no way the Saskatchewan government could openly give Crown Resource Aggregate for this project, but they did do that, and Brad Wall, halfway through his premiership, he abruptly resigned and said he doesn't need to do anything with politics no more. So this was shocking, because nobody in a position of power leaves that power halfway through.
Bob's second major allegation asserts that Amarjeet Sohi, the infrastructure minister at the time, was purportedly involved in facilitating his brothers and his election campaign donors' trucking companies in secretly hauling aggregate out of that Crown land.
Amarjeet Sohi was personally involved in the ill doings of this project, and Amarjeet Sohi did not disclose that he was in Regina on February 21st of 2017 at a trucker meeting that was attended by only Sikh truckers from Edmonton and a few from Regina that are affiliated with this Edmonton trucking operation.
Indeed, Amarjeet Sohi did not disclose this trip to Regina on February 21st, 2017. Bob had multiple eyewitnesses informing him of this visit, and the situation becomes more complex when the materials manager for VINCI-RBDB confirms that Sohi's middle brother Harkesh and his election donor's trucking company, Edmonton-based White Rock Ventures WRV, are hauling the Crown aggregate.
Who is the main hauling provider for you guys?
Well, the same. Most of them are just owner-operators. You guys, they might have, 2 or 3 trucks. We do have WRV out of Edmonton. They brought out, depending on what our needs are, up to, I think, last winter we had 60 of their trucks out for about 10 days when we had a big push on. So
you were at that meeting on February 21st, were you not? Where the infrastructure minister was in Regina at the trucker meeting?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I thought so.
So he came to the trucking company from Ottawa. He did not list his travel and expense it to the federal government. Why did he come to Regina, Saskatchewan? The reason that he came is because he is personally involved in the loot of taxpayers' money.
A corporate search reveals White Rock Ventures Inc., based in Edmonton, where Sohi currently serves as mayor. Notably, Harkesh Sohi, Amarjeet Sohi's brother, is listed as a director, and the company is entirely owned by a numbered company. An analysis of the financial statements from 2011 election campaign in Edmonton highlights donations from companies linked to Harkesh Sohi. Among the donors is a numbered company owned by Harkesh and White Rock Ventures, partly owned by him and other affiliates.
So we have somebody that is completely uneducated, can barely speak broken English, overlooking a multi-billion-dollar project in which now he has his own sibling involved in from Edmonton. And the Infrastructure Minister of Canada was not disclosing companies being operated by his own family members and election donors on the Regina Bypass project.
The Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner Canada's refusal to provide Sohi's public declarations, which have been removed and are no longer available, raises questions about transparency and accountability. Luckily, Bob had printed version of these no longer available declarations from 2016 to 2018 during Sohi's reign, as in various federal roles, including as Minister of Infrastructure and Natural Resources.
Because I was fully aware that Amarjeet Sohi was complicit, I started to monitor his federal conflict of interest disclosures. And on those disclosures, he was very deceptive in the fact that he did not disclose the trucking company that is partially owned by his middle brother, as well as other donators for his election campaigns. He disclosed some company by his older brother, and another company that his wife has some ownership in, but he disclosed nothing regarding his middle brother.
Notably, while he disclosed conflicts with certain numbered companies, there is an absence of disclosure related to companies operated by his brother Harkesh, such as White Rock Ventures. This omission is significant.
His middle brother's trucking company and other affiliates all came from Edmonton, Alberta, to help the French giant from France remove this crown aggregate from a Ministry of Saskatchewan gravel pit quickly to the Regina Bypass project, so the project could be completed and then the French giant could collect money from the Saskatchewan government.
This raises questions about why Sohi did not disclose potential conflicts with Harkesh's Canadian ventures, especially considering their joint financial interests and Harkesh's involvement in companies that donated to Sohi's political campaigns.
I reached out to Amarjeet Sohi for comment, but did not receive a response.
With the background of Amarjeet Sohi being imprisoned when he was an Indian national in an Indian prison as a terrorist charged with many different crimes, he thinks like a parasite, and he is a parasite towards Canada. So when he became the infrastructure minister, his head was full of dollar signs, and all he wanted to do was to make projects compromised by using his authority and his power as the infrastructure minister of Canada.
Mr. Speaker, despite crowing from the other side of the House, we're starting to see that the traffic on the bypass isn't even a fraction of what was planned.
Cathy Sproul raised this issue, I believe, in October and December of 2019 in the Saskatchewan legislature, and the responses given by the Sask Party at that time were completely unacceptable.
Why was that environmental assessment skipped? And why was provincial gravel and construction material taken from the Indian Head gravel pits for the bypass when they promised back in 2014 there would be no substantial use of provincial resources?
Mr. Speaker, a fair question. Fair questions with respect to a bypass, Mr. Speaker, the Saskatchewan Hospital in North Battleford. One thing the people of this province can rest assured of is under the NDP, Mr. Speaker, there would be no Saskatchewan Hospital in North Battleford replacement. There would be no Regina Bypass, Mr. Speaker.
They just brushed her off, and Cathy Sproul did not, I feel she did not pursue the corruption involved with the Regina Bypass project because it involved a Sikh, Khalistani, Amarjeet Sohi, and she was a provincial member of the NDP, and the federal member or leader of the NDP is Jagmeet Singh, who also belongs to the Khalistani Sikh political nexus in Canada.
The ordeal of the P3 Regina Bypass project does not end here. One of the executives for VINCI-RBDB, Gordon Passini, a Canadian whose name came out in the Panama Papers, raises questions on who the Saskatchewan government chooses to be in partnership with.
So he is employed by a subsidiary of the French giant, and his name had come out approximately the same time that Amarjeet Sohi became the infrastructure minister. So we have a massive P3 infrastructure project. We have an infrastructure minister of Canada that is not even educated, and we have a executive for the foreign French giant that is responsible for financing and building this project up until 2049, whose name had just come out in the Panama Papers. And we have a premier of Saskatchewan that resigned halfway through his premiership, saying that I don't want to be the premier no more.
I have contacted Mr. Passini for comments regarding VINCI-RBDB's perspective, and if he's aware that his name came out in the Panama Papers. Also to ask him if CRA or any other investigative agencies have made contact with him, but he did not respond to my inquiry. This raises further questions. Did Executive Committee member for VINCI-RBDB, Mr. Gordon Passini, disclose this concerning revelation to the Saskatchewan government at the time of Regina Bypass Construction? But it doesn't end there. Another suspicious connection is between the president of Sask Built at the time, Rupen Pandya, and his sister-in-law, Unita Pandya.
The president and CEO of Sask Builds, that is responsible for clearing and paying for the construction of the bypass project on behalf of the Saskatchewan government, was receiving invoices from his own sister-in-law, Juanita Pandya. Juanita was employed at that time by RBDB, and she was a financial controller for the project on behalf of RBDB for the foreign French construction giant Vinci. So Juanita would prepare invoices, Rupen would get the checks issued, and the French company would distribute that money amongst their consortium.
I reached out to Mr. Rupen Pandya, who's now the president of Sask Power, to inquire about this allegation. But instead of responding himself, he forwarded my questions to the Ministry of Highway. And according to the ministry, Unita started working few days after the contract was awarded, and by that time financial obligations were transferred to the ministry from Sask Builds. Although the government claims some sort of disclosure was made regarding this conflict of interest, I was not provided with the copy to examine.
This does not reflect positively on the provincial government of Saskatchewan or the federal government under the leadership of Justin Trudeau, because he appointed unqualified cabinet ministers because of their ethnic background. And in Amarjeet Sohi's case, he made a Indian national that was a terrorist in his own country into the Infrastructure and Communities Minister of Canada, jeopardizing the security of not only Canada, but also the United States of America.
When Amarjeet Sohi was appointed by Justin Trudeau as the infrastructure minister, on top of having no education and no experience, he had a history of terrorism-related charges in India. While he was in prison, Sohi leaked a letter pleading for his innocence and listing the charges he was facing. I went through the Indian justice codes to see what the exact charges Amarjeet Sohi was facing. Here's the list. Rioting armed with a deadly weapon, unlawful assembly member's responsibility for offense committed, attempt to murder, assault or criminal force to woman with intent to outrage her modesty, assisting in concealment of stolen property, criminal conspiracy, harboring an offender, sedition, possession of prohibited arms or ammunition, offenses relating to arms and ammunition, and provisions related to terrorist activities. How could someone with this sort of history be elevated to such power? In Canada.
In February of 2015, when City Councillor for Edmonton, Amarjeet Sohi, was given the federal Liberal ticket, he had to cover up his crimes committed in India, and he utilized a less than mediocre journalist named Paula Simmons that worked for the Edmonton Journal, and she basically whitewashed all of Amarjeet Sohi's crimes that he was charged with in India, and basically made him look like a freedom fighter and a living martyr, when the true identity of Amarjeet Sohi was a Khalistani terrorist in India as an Indian national. As a reward for whitewashing Amarjeet Sohi's misdeeds in India, she was rewarded in 2018 by Justin Trudeau and made into a senator.
As I mentioned before, Amarjeet Sohi did not respond for a comment. I also reached out to Senator Paula Simons, who did not mention the charges Sohi was facing in her article written before his appointment, and seemingly exhibited no skepticism towards Sohi and his story. However, she too did not respond to my inquiry.
The way that Justin Trudeau is promoting unqualified Khalistan supporter politicians in Canada into high-level positions is not good for the future of Canada. India is an excellent country. proud Hindu majority nation with an excellent leadership, and Trudeau has destroyed all relations with India because of his love for terrorism and Sikh Khalistani politicians in Canada.
Bob says he reached out to media companies and politicians years ago to get this story out, including Globe and Mail and Pierre Poilievre and independent media organizations, but says nobody pursued the story.
Canadian people need to report and try to stop high-level corruption, because it is high-level corruption that damages the future for everyone, including future generations. Small things matter, and as well, and we have enough mainstream media and independent self-proclaimed media reporting on illogical stories that have no ramifications towards anything that really matters. I think that Canadians need to focus and eradicate corruption.
Are you not afraid?
Of course, there is always a security concern when you're involved with very dangerous people like Amarjeet Sohi and other pro-Khalistani politicians in Canada.
In my next video, I will examine further allegations of high-level corruption involving Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his privileged cabinet ministers in federally funded P3 projects, including the Gordie Howe International Bridge project.
I would just like to say to corrupt politicians and corrupt bureaucrats, we will catch you. If you do corruption, people are watching and people are researching, and your time will come.
I take investigative journalism seriously. That is why I came here to Regina, Saskatchewan from Calgary, Alberta, to see it with my own eyes. And here I am standing in a hole, all the aggregate is gone. What is going on here? Well, that's why I came, to figure it out. If you would like to support me, because I'm not government funded, please consider donating at mediabizergan.com/donate so I can do more work like this. Thank you.